go. So you can't get me. We need you. Tired of this. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired.
The morning of June 16, 2015 began like any other in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Residents went about their routines, unaware that their community would soon witness a horrific act of violence that would shake them to their core. At approximately 11:30 a.m., on a busy street in broad daylight, Tamara Wilson-Seidle's life ended violently at the hands of her ex-husband, Philip Seidle. What made this tragedy even more disturbing? Philip wasn't just any enraged ex-spouse, he was a respected 22-year veteran sergeant with the Neptune Township Police Department. The very person sworn to protect others became the perpetrator of a public execution, while their 7-year-old daughter watched from his police vehicle. Tamara was more than just a victim. She was a devoted mother of 9 children who had recently found the courage to leave her abusive marriage after 27 years. Philip was a decorated officer whose badge concealed a history of domestic violence that had gone unchecked for decades. This isn't just a story about a murder. It's about systemic failures, missed warning signs, and how a position of authority can shield someone from accountability until it's too late. Before we continue with Tamara's story, if you're interested in learning about cases that expose flaws in our justice system and the complex dynamics of domestic violence, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light, ensuring victims like Tamara aren't forgotten and that we can learn from these tragedies. Now, let's explore how Tamara's life path led to this devastating conclusion. Before the tragedy that would define her final moments, Tamara Wilson was known for her warm smile and generous spirit. Born and raised in a close-knit New Jersey community, she grew up with strong family values that would later shape her dedication as a mother. Friends who knew Tamara in her youth described her as vibrant and determined. She excelled in school, particularly in subjects that allowed her to express her natural creativity. Her high school yearbook hinted at a young woman with dreams of building a meaningful career and creating a loving family of her own. Tamara's strength was evident early in her life when she faced and overcame cancer as a young woman. This battle shaped her perspective, giving her a profound appreciation for life and a resilience that would later help her endure difficult circumstances. Her breast cancer survival story demonstrated her fighting spirit long before she would need that same determination in her marriage. Tamara always had this incredible ability to make others feel valued, recalled a childhood friend. She was the person everyone wanted to be around because she lifted you up even after everything she'd been through with her health. In her early 20s, Tamara harbored aspirations of pursuing higher education. She had expressed interest in child development and education, fields that aligned with her nurturing nature. Those who knew her believed she might become a teacher or counselor, roles where her empathy and patience would have made a profound difference. She enjoyed simple pleasures, cooking family recipes passed down through generations, creating handmade gifts for loved ones, and planning gatherings that brought people together. These qualities, her warmth, her thoughtfulness, her desire to create connection, were fundamental to who Tamara was. Little did she know that meeting Philip Seidle would alter the trajectory of her life, gradually dimming the light that so many had admired in her. Tamara met Philip Seidle in the late 1980s through mutual friends at a local community event. Philip, already working in law enforcement, presented himself as confident and protective, qualities that initially attracted Tamara. His uniform and badge symbolized security and respect in the community, creating an immediate impression of trustworthiness. Their courtship moved quickly. Friends noticed how Philip seemed to sweep Tamara off her feet with grand gestures and promises of stability. Within months, he had integrated himself completely into her life, becoming a constant presence at family gatherings and social events. What many didn't recognize then were the subtle warning signs beneath the surface. Philip displayed possessive behaviors that were misinterpreted as devotion. He would call repeatedly when Tamara was out with friends, often appearing unexpectedly to check on her. These actions, framed as protection, established a pattern of monitoring that would intensify over time. He always needed to know where she was and who she was with, one friend later recalled. We thought he was just crazy about her, but looking back, it was control disguised as care. The power imbalance in their relationship took root early. Philip's position as a police officer gave him authority not just in the community but within their relationship. He made decisions about their social circle, their finances, and increasingly, Tamara's personal choices. Tamara's family noticed her becoming quieter, more deferential in Philip's presence. Her once independent spirit seemed to dim as she began to filter her thoughts and actions through the lens of his approval. By the time they married in 1990, the foundation had been laid for a relationship where Philip's dominance would only grow stronger, and Tamara's voice would become increasingly silenced. Tamara and Philip married in 1990, beginning what would become 27 years of increasing tension and violence. The early years of their marriage showed glimpses of the trouble ahead. Philip's controlling behavior intensified after they exchanged vows, as if marriage had cemented his authority over Tamara's life. Their first child arrived within a year of marriage. Over the next 2 decades, their family grew to include 9 children, a beautiful testament to Tamara's nurturing spirit, but also a factor that complicated her ability to leave the deteriorating situation. By 1994, police records show the first documented domestic incident at the Seidle home. Neighbors reported shouting, but no charges were filed, a pattern that would repeat throughout their marriage. Philip's status as a fellow officer created a shield around their home, with responding officers often treating these calls with uncomfortable familiarity rather than professional concern. The blue wall of silence extended to his home life, explained a former colleague. Domestic calls to an officer's residence were handled differently, more like a courtesy visit than a potential crime scene. As their children grew, they witnessed the volatile nature of their parents' relationship. Court documents later revealed that Philip would use his service weapon to intimidate Tamara during arguments, sometimes removing it from his holster during heated moments. Despite these incidents being reported to his superiors, Philip maintained his position and access to his firearm. Between 2012 and 2015, police responded to the Seidle home multiple times. During this period, Tamara attempted to separate from Philip twice before finally filing for divorce in 2014. The divorce proceedings seemed to trigger even more dangerous behavior from Philip, who couldn't accept Tamara's decision to leave. Before we continue with this tragic story, I want to ask you, have you noticed warning signs in relationships around you that might indicate abuse? The patterns in Tamara's story, isolation, control, intimidation, are red flags we should all recognize. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's create a conversation that might help someone in a similar situation find the courage to seek help before it's too late. Philip Seidle's 22-year career with the Neptune Township Police Department wasn't just his profession, it was a shield that protected him from consequences. As a sergeant, he commanded respect from colleagues and wielded authority within the community. This position created an almost impenetrable barrier for Tamara when she needed protection. When domestic incidents occurred, Tamara faced an impossible dilemma. The very system designed to protect victims was directly connected to her abuser. Calling 911 meant Philip's colleagues would respond, officers who knew him personally, who had shared shifts and department gatherings with him. This reality severely limited her options for safety. Who do you call when your abuser is the police? A domestic violence advocate later questioned. The power imbalance becomes overwhelming. Records revealed that between 2012 and 2015, multiple complaints were filed regarding Philip's behavior. Despite these documented concerns, the department's response was notably inadequate. Philip was temporarily disarmed once in 2012 after a domestic incident, but his weapon was returned to him after a brief psychological evaluation. Internal affairs files showed that Philip's supervisors were aware of his volatile home situation. Yet, he continued to advance in his career, maintaining his authority and access to firearms. The department's reluctance to address these issues effectively demonstrated how law enforcement can sometimes protect their own at the expense of public safety. For Tamara, this meant that her husband's badge didn't just represent his job, it represented a power structure that consistently failed to hold him accountable, leaving her increasingly isolated and vulnerable. The paper trail of missed opportunities to protect Tamara Wilson-Seidle tells a disturbing story of institutional breakdown. Between 2012 and 2015, police were called to the Seidle residence at least 9 times for domestic disturbances. Each incident represented a critical chance to intervene, each one squandered. In July 2012, following a particularly severe altercation, Philip's service weapon was temporarily confiscated. Department records show he underwent a psychological evaluation lasting just 2 sessions before being deemed fit to return to duty. His firearm was returned despite Tamara's expressed fears about his threatening behavior with the weapon. Another telling incident occurred in 2013 when Tamara sought a restraining order. During the court proceedings, she detailed how Philip would remove his service weapon during arguments, creating an atmosphere of intimidation. Despite this testimony, the judge, perhaps influenced by Philip's standing in law enforcement, issued only temporary restrictions that were soon lifted. The Neptune Township Police Department's own policies required thorough review of officers involved in domestic incidents. Yet Philip's personnel file showed minimal disciplinary action. His supervisors repeatedly classified domestic calls to his home as family disputes rather than potential criminal behavior, effectively downgrading their severity. Perhaps most troubling was the department's failure to implement their own disarmament protocols. Guidelines clearly stated that officers with documented domestic violence complaints should face restricted duty and weapons assessment. For Philip, these protocols were inconsistently applied or bypassed entirely. If this story moves you as much as it does me, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others. Domestic violence thrives in silence, and awareness is the first step toward change. Your simple action could help someone recognize warning signs in their own relationship or understand the additional barriers faced by those whose abusers hold positions of authority. Together, we can amplify voices that have been silenced for too long. After 24 years of marriage marked by control and abuse, Tamara Wilson-Seidle took the brave step of filing for divorce in 2014. Court documents revealed her primary motivation: creating a safe environment for her children. In her petition, she detailed years of emotional and physical abuse, citing incidents where Philip had used his position as a police officer to intimidate and isolate her. "I need to protect my children and myself," she wrote in her statement to the court. "The home environment has become increasingly dangerous, and I fear for our safety." The divorce proceedings were contentious from the start. Philip contested custody arrangements and financial settlements, dragging out the process for months. Despite these obstacles, Tamara persisted, determined to build a new life free from fear. As part of her journey toward independence, Tamara secured her own housing and began rebuilding social connections that had withered under Philip's control. She reconnected with old friends and found support networks that helped her navigate the challenging transition. In early 2015, Tamara began a new relationship, a development that seemed to trigger intense jealousy in Philip. Friends reported that he became fixated on her new life, frequently driving by her residence and appearing unexpectedly at places she frequented. "He couldn't accept that she was moving on," said a family friend. "He would call her dozens of times a day, alternating between pleading for reconciliation and making veiled threats." Text messages recovered after her death showed Philip's growing hostility. "You think you can just leave and be happy?" read one message sent just weeks before the tragedy. "I won't let that happen." Despite these concerning behaviors, Tamara continued moving forward. She was finalizing custody arrangements and had plans to relocate further from Philip's sphere of influence, plans she would never get to realize as Philip's anger and possessiveness reached a breaking point that would end her life. The morning of June 16, 2015, began as an ordinary Tuesday for Tamara Wilson-Seidle. She had dropped off several of her children at school and was running errands in Asbury Park, New Jersey. According to cell phone records, she received multiple calls from Philip between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., which she mostly ignored, a boundary she had been trying to establish in the months following their divorce. At approximately 11:20 a.m., Philip spotted Tamara's black Volkswagen Jetta near the intersection of Ridge and Sewell Avenues. He was off-duty but driving his Honda Pilot, which was equipped with police lights. More disturbingly, he had their 7-year-old daughter in the vehicle with him. Witnesses reported seeing Philip activate the police lights and aggressively pursue Tamara through residential streets. One eyewitness later described seeing a man in a car chasing another car with a woman inside. At 11:26 a.m., Philip used his vehicle to force Tamara's car off the road near Sewell Avenue, causing her to crash into a parked car. Bystanders watched in horror as Philip emerged from his vehicle, approached Tamara's car, and drew his .40 caliber Glock service weapon. "When I heard the crash, I came outside and then I seen a guy with a gun, so we backed into the doorway," one witness recounted. After that it was just like a lot of yelling between him and the police, and he was doing a lot of yelling explaining like how he's tired of going to court for child support. Philip fired multiple shots through the driver's side window, striking Tamara repeatedly. The same witness continued. After that he shot the lady through the car 3 times. 3 loud gunshots rang off. He then stepped back, called someone on his phone, later determined to be his police supervisor, and returned to fire several more shots. In total, Philip fired 12 shots at Tamara. Throughout this horrific scene, his young daughter remained in his vehicle, witnessing the murder of her mother. Several bystanders called 911, with the first call logged at 11:28 a.m. Asbury Park police officers arrived within minutes, finding Philip pacing near the vehicles with his gun pressed against his head, threatening suicide. Despite being armed and having just committed murder, responding officers did not immediately neutralize the threat. Instead, a standoff ensued for nearly 20 minutes. During this time, Tamara remained in her vehicle, mortally wounded, while medical assistance was delayed due to the active threat Philip posed. Body camera footage later revealed that some responding officers recognized Philip as a fellow law enforcement officer. At 11:50 a.m., after negotiations with fellow officers, Philip surrendered and was taken into custody. Only then could emergency medical personnel approach Tamara, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at the scene at 12:14 p.m. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Philip's daughter was taken into protective custody, traumatized by witnessing her father murder her mother. News spread quickly through the community, with many expressing shock that such violence could unfold in broad daylight, and disbelief that the perpetrator was a sworn officer of the law. What should have been prevented through years of warning signs and opportunities for intervention had culminated in a public tragedy that left 9 children without their mother and exposed critical failures in how domestic violence is handled when the abuser wears a badge. In the hours following Tamara Wilson-Seidle's murder, her 9 children faced an unimaginable reality. Their mother was gone, their father in custody, and their family shattered beyond recognition. The youngest child, who had witnessed the shooting, required immediate psychological intervention, while the older siblings gathered to comfort one another and process their shared trauma. Child welfare services quickly became involved, working to keep the siblings together when possible. Extended family members stepped forward, opening their homes to ensure the children wouldn't be separated through the foster care system. A family court judge expedited emergency custody arrangements, prioritizing stability for the children who had already endured so much. "These kids lost both parents in a single day," noted a family advocate assigned to the case. "One to death and one to incarceration. The magnitude of their loss is immeasurable." The community's response was swift and compassionate. A memorial fund established for the children raised over $75,000 within the first week. Local schools provided counseling services, and neighbors organized meal deliveries and childcare assistance for the relatives who had taken in the children. Media coverage intensified as details emerged about Philip's history of domestic violence and the Neptune Township Police Department's handling of previous incidents. National news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a tragic example of how domestic abuse can turn deadly when warning signs are ignored, especially when the abuser holds a position of authority. The Asbury Park Press ran a series of investigative reports examining how Philip had maintained his position and service weapon despite documented concerns. These articles prompted public calls for an independent review of the department's policies regarding officers involved in domestic disputes. Legal proceedings against Philip began with his arraignment on June 17, 2015. He was charged with first-degree murder, second-degree possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, and endangering the welfare of a child. The prosecutor's office pursued the case aggressively, citing the premeditated nature of the crime and Philip's abuse of his position as a law enforcement officer. During pretrial hearings, Philip's defense team initially suggested they would pursue an insanity defense, claiming he had suffered a mental breakdown. However, evidence of his calculated actions, including the pursuit of Tamara's vehicle and his phone call between the 2 rounds of gunfire, undermined this strategy. The Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office assigned their most experienced team to the case, recognizing its significance not just as a murder trial but as a case that would scrutinize how domestic violence is handled within police departments. As the legal process unfolded, the focus remained on securing justice for Tamara and accountability for the systems that failed to protect her. Philip Seidle's case moved through the legal system with unusual speed for a capital murder trial. Initially facing life imprisonment without parole, his legal team worked aggressively to negotiate a plea agreement. In March 2016, just 9 months after Tamara's death, Philip accepted a deal that significantly reduced his potential sentence. The courtroom fell silent on September 29, 2016, as Philip Seidle stood before Superior Court Judge Joseph Oxley. He had pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter and child endangerment, charges reduced from the original first-degree murder. The plea agreement eliminated the possibility of a life sentence without parole. During the sentencing hearing, several of Tamara's children delivered devastating impact statements that revealed the true nature of their family life. "I cannot bear to see his image. I'm embarrassed to share his name. Whenever I even hear it, it's like stabbing knives into my back," one child testified, unable to look at their father. Another child exposed the reality of their home life. "Our father lived a double life, only one that we saw in the house and another one that was displayed to the public and to his girlfriends. When my mother finally managed to have enough strength to be free of him and his grip on her, he could not accept it and decided to murder her." Perhaps most revealing was the testimony that challenged the narrative that Philip had simply snapped on that fatal day. "Many people think he just snapped, which would have been bad enough, but people don't understand what happened behind closed doors in our home. It was my father who abused my mother constantly and relentlessly." The oldest Seidle child explained their family's difficult decision to accept the plea deal. "To avoid further trauma to our family, we have thoughtfully accepted this guilty plea." When Philip addressed the court, his statement was telling. Rather than expressing genuine remorse, he attempted to justify his actions by criticizing Tamara. "She condemned me to my children for 3.5 years for being with someone else, and then I never even introduced my kids to my lady, and now she moves this guy in and basically replaces me with him, makes him their father." This statement aligned with text messages revealed during the investigation, where Philip had written to a friend immediately after the shooting, "I got tired of Tamara's SHT and shot her." Judge Oxley sentenced Philip to 30 years in prison, with a requirement to serve 85% of his term before becoming eligible for parole. This meant he could potentially be released after serving approximately 25.5 years, when he would be in his mid-70s. For Tamara's family, no sentence could bring her back or heal the wounds inflicted by her death. The legal proceedings provided a measure of accountability, but many felt that true justice remained elusive, not just in Philip's sentencing, but in addressing the broader failures that allowed his violence to continue unchecked for so many years. Tamara Wilson-Seidle's murder exposed critical flaws in how domestic violence is handled when the abuser wears a badge. The case revealed a troubling pattern of institutional protection that prioritized an officer's career over victim safety. Research has consistently shown that police families experience domestic violence at rates significantly higher than the general population. Studies indicate that law enforcement households are 2 to 4 times more likely to experience domestic abuse compared to civilian families. This alarming statistic creates a dangerous paradox. Those tasked with protecting domestic violence victims are statistically more likely to be perpetrators themselves. An independent review commissioned after Tamara's death identified multiple breakdowns in accountability. Despite responding to the Seidle home numerous times, officers consistently classified these incidents as domestic disputes rather than potential criminal behavior. This classification minimized the severity and prevented proper documentation that might have triggered more significant intervention. The review also highlighted the department's inconsistent application of weapon removal protocols. Philip had his service weapon temporarily confiscated in 2012 after a domestic incident, but it was returned after a brief psychological evaluation, despite Tamara's documented concerns about his threatening behavior with the firearm. There was a clear reluctance to fully investigate one of their own, noted the review panel. This created a dangerous blind spot that ultimately had fatal consequences. In response to these findings, several police departments in New Jersey implemented policy changes. The Attorney General's office issued new guidelines requiring mandatory removal of weapons when officers are involved in domestic incidents, independent investigation of all domestic complaints involving law enforcement, enhanced psychological evaluation before returning service weapons, improved training on recognizing officer-involved domestic violence. Additionally, several departments established partnerships with domestic violence organizations to provide external oversight and advocacy for victims whose abusers work in law enforcement. While these changes came too late for Tamara, they represented important steps toward addressing the unique challenges faced by those whose abusers hold positions of power and authority within the very systems designed to protect victims. Tamara Wilson-Seidle's tragic story has become a powerful catalyst for change in how domestic violence is understood and addressed, particularly when perpetrators hold positions of authority. Her case is now included in training materials for police departments across the country, highlighting the critical importance of accountability regardless of an abuser's profession. Domestic violence advocates point to the increased awareness of badge-protected abuse following Tamara's death. Hotlines report that more victims whose abusers work in law enforcement now reach out for specialized support, understanding the unique challenges they face. Tamara's story has given others the courage to speak up, explained a director at a national domestic violence prevention organization. Her experience shows why we need specialized protocols when the abuser has a badge and a gun. Perhaps Tamara's most meaningful legacy lives on through her 9 children. Despite unimaginable trauma, they have honored their mother by advocating for stronger protections for domestic violence victims. For viewers watching this story, there are vital lessons to remember. 1. Domestic violence can affect anyone, regardless of background or community standing. 2. Warning signs should never be dismissed, especially when weapons are involved. 3. Leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for victims. 4. When systems protect abusers rather than victims, tragedy becomes more likely. If this story has impacted you, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. We cover these important stories to raise awareness and potentially save lives. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone recognize warning signs in their own relationship or better understand how to support a loved one in danger. Tamara's voice was silenced, but through sharing her story, we ensure her experience continues to create meaningful change.